Welcome back to the Monte and Wolf Show here on Last Free Nation. And we are here to discuss all kinds of LCK playoffs today. We are definitely in the thick of things now, Wolf. We got the upset. We both of us predicted Hanwha to beat T1, so I'm not sure if we're going to call that an upset or not.
Yeah.
Followed by the brilliant T1 press conference where they revealed that they had been getting DDoSed on their solo queue accounts. Let's start with that because that caused quite a bit of discussion. What's your take on the T1 saying that they haven't been able to practice because they've been DDoSed on their solo queue accounts and have had trouble scrimming, even though the scrimming has like fixed itself now?
So leading up into the T1 matches, I had been trying to find solo queue data on the players, especially Zeus, to see how much Rek'Sai he was playing, because that was going to be a big sticking point for me in terms of like how well can he play this champion, how much of an impact he's going to make, because as not difficult, like as easy as it is for Rek'Sai to be played in lane, I think in terms of team fights and setting up skirmishes and stuff like that, it can be quite complicated. So I was curious about that. Is he going to leave it open? Is he going to ban it? Or is he going to play it every game? What's T1's MO going to be? And I just couldn't find any data. And then I noticed that some of the other players like Gumayusi didn't have really any solo queue data as well leading up into the match. And then the day of, I was like, I just don't see it. So I assumed they had new accounts. I was like, I guess the accounts that are on like tracking the pros and stuff and OPGG are just outdated. And I was like, all right, whatever. I guess I just can't find it. And then I, went cast that series. And then the press conference happened afterwards where they were like, yeah, we can't practice. We haven't been able to really play for 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, that makes sense, to me, because I couldn't find the data. I was like, where's the solo queue information? And, as we've talked about on this show a lot, this DDoS issue has been happening since like December. And, we've kind of been able to figure out that basically, if you have someone's solo queue information and you know when they're playing, you could just DDoS them. It's not like a traditional DDoS account that's attacking someone's internet service directly. It's, client based, right? We've discussed this on the show before. And I guess because these players are so high profile, they have so many haters, whatever, that they've been targeted specifically. And obviously because their solo queue accounts are out there and they're tracked on a lot of different websites. For example, there's been tons of websites over the years where you can watch, first person views and replays of T1 players. It's pretty easy to find out when they're playing, when their solo queue accounts that they've made public are out there. So, this is not, to me, like, shocking that this happened, right? And
Yeah.
from what I've heard
It's
from talking,
also for the people who are curious about why they can't just make new accounts. Well, Riot did give them super accounts, and these are the ones with high MMR. But the problem is that they're still lower MMR than they would normally be, so it's not great practice. And then you might ask, okay, well, why don't they just play on those accounts until they reach high MMR? The problem is that it is very easy to identify who they are once they start to get to high MMR because there are tells such as which item slots have which items, where your flash is bound, your champion pool, the times of day at which you're playing, because pro players can't play when the scrim blocks are in solo queue. So it's pretty easy to identify who pro players are, because if you know scrim block times and all the pro teams have the same scrim block schedule, they're not going to be playing solo queue within those hours.
yeah.
So
It's just,
and even if it was a guess, like the DDoSers are obviously committed to this in a way where they could just DDoS somebody who wasn't the player in question and it wouldn't matter, right? Like you wouldn't hear about it necessarily. So it is basically, once you reach Challenger and you're the top 200 players, if there's a new account suddenly in Challenger that looks like Gumayushi's account, it probably is Gumayushi. Like pro team scouts are very good at identifying who is who on the ladder, because they use it for, tracking champion pools for preparation before their matches. And it's not that hard for really anybody to do. So basically, like, yeah, they're either going to get bad practice at lower elos, or they are going to get discovered and then DDoSed.
yeah. And to me, like, beyond all of that, it's just not efficient use of your practice time, like leading into an important match when you have a turnaround of 2 days.
Yeah.
After the Hanwha loss to then move into the Dplus series, are you really going to be grinding these accounts out to try to get them to where they need to be and hope that you don't get DDoS? Like, it's just not really efficient use of your time. And I mean, that was all that Riot at the moment seemed to be able to do, was to give them new accounts and then hope that they stayed secret. But there's a limit,
And
obviously.
presumably, I mean, basically everybody assumes, but does not technically know, that this is related to the anti-cheat program that they use on the Korean and Japanese client only. And presumably the reason Riot isn't doing anything is because they're planning on implementing Vanguard worldwide. And so why not just wait? Like, why bother fixing this when Vanguard's going to come in and fix this problem anyway?
Yeah, I mean that's the assumption, right? Like I don't have any other information about that, but
Right.
it's otherwise it kind of just doesn't make any sense, right? Unless it's something else in the client, like we've discussed previously, like some of the Korean law implemented stuff, like the you've been playing for 3 hours, and other like weird stuff that's exclusive to the Korean client. So, for me, I think it's the press conference. A lot of people were kind of salty that Faker said it after they lost, almost as if it discredited Hanwha. I don't think that's what Faker was saying at all. I think there's just a lot of really weird misinformation going around the internet. I think there's a lot of like really bad takes. For me, I thought that if you lose a series 0-3 after you haven't been able to practice and you've been kind of keeping this under wraps that you haven't been able to practice, and you have this huge press conference that everybody's gonna be watching more than usual because you got 3-0'd and your fans thought you were the favorites, even though most analysts did not, and they thought Hanwha was going to win for sure. I think it's a good moment to be like, look, we've been experiencing this issue. We haven't been able to talk about this publicly. I think it's a good time for me. Like, I think it's one of the best times. Whether they do just like wait another day and then like tweet it, like I think it was actually totally appropriate for Faker and kkOma to, look at each other and go, all right, it's time. Let's talk about this in the press conference because it's been a serious issue for our team that they've kept under wraps. And then they had people getting mad that like T1 made Faker say it. Like I've seen T1 fans say this, like, and then Becker did his stream, and then we had all that stuff going around. I really think it's actually not that big of a deal. Like I really don't think this is that dramatic that Faker said this after a loss. For me, like I think it's totally fine. He has the right to say that something his team has been experiencing, and it seems to be factually accurate that this is actually going on, and it affects their practice, and that's okay. Like it's okay to say that. I don't think that in any way discredits Hanwha. Faker did not say, "Well, we lost because we couldn't practice." He said, "Well, it's been a tough time because we've been having problems with solo queue." He in no way said like, "And that's why we lost." He just said like, "It's been tough to prepare for these matches." Um, Now you could get upset with that if you want, but I really don't feel like it's a diss to Hanwha in any way, and I think it's totally fine.
Yeah. I think the main issue was that they had too many people saying too many different things, right? They kept, more information kept coming out. I think that they should have just had a prepared statement that they read at the press conference and then released that statement like in text form on their social media. So therefore, there was only one message going out, right? Because I think people have picked it apart because there's been so much like the new information came out, et cetera, right? It wasn't planned or crafted well enough.
It was very clear that Riot did not want T1 to talk about this, and T1 eventually was like, "We're going to talk about this." I mean, to me, that's what it
Yeah,
seems,
sure.
right?
And
Because
and also, what also got lost here was that Gen.G had been experiencing the same thing.
yeah, and obviously a ton of streamers, Korean streamers as well, and League of Legends streaming in Korea took a big dip for a while, and I still feel like it hasn't really recovered from all of this because there's a lot of big league streamers that stream on the new Naver streaming platform in Africa. And um, for those who don't know, there's kind of this big shakeup that's happening right now in Korean streaming because Twitch died basically, and not it's not dead. You can still watch it. I can still stream on Twitch here, etc. But like Koreans can't make money off Twitch anymore, so they've either moved to the Naver streaming platform or the Africa streaming platform. And so there's like some new streaming people appearing. There's some old streaming people who are like taking a break. Some people went to YouTube. And then League of Legends as a category of streaming has kind of taken a big hit because all the big ones who are streaming it are getting DDoS. So a lot of them are doing variety or playing PlayStation games or whatever right now. So just because it's frustrating if you are streaming to 10,000 people and then you can't play anymore, and then you're just like, well, I have to do something else. It's an issue that needs to be solved, and I think it's an issue that you can't. We all know either it's the Vanguard thing you just mentioned, or it's a more complicated issue to solve. Otherwise, Riot would have fixed it because it's negatively impacting them. But obviously, it's a sensitive topic that people are really frustrated about internally in Riot Korea, and maybe they were like, T1, can you just not, make this into a big deal. And eventually T1 just let it out there. And then said like it's been happening since December, which we all knew, right? It's just a frustrating situation that has plagued this season in a lot of ways. But I think scrims are going to be your most valuable way to practice at this point. Like obviously leading up into playoffs and trying to work on the new patch. Like there's a lot of new champions that have become a lot more relevant recently. Aurelion Sol, for example, has risen up to the meta a ton. And Rek'Sai, is obviously very strong now, and it's not really been a pick Zeus has ever played before this. So there are some things that you want to play in solo queue that you don't want to just like jump into a scrim and be like, I haven't played Rek'Sai in 2 months, but I'm gonna try it out in the scrim. Like there are some things you want to do solo queue, but at this point now, it's mostly just scrims that you're going to be training on leading into your match against Hanwha and then potentially Gen.G. So I think it's not going to matter as much over the course of this next week. I think this is more of an issue that affected them over the last, several weeks of time.
Yeah. And like the scrimming issue has been fixed, and the scrimming issue is actually the most important one. Whereas the solo queue is annoying, but it's not quite as bad.
Yeah.
Although I will say this next week might be a little bit rough because probably the teams won't be practicing against each other in Korea. They'll be finding teams that are practicing that haven't been eliminated, or perhaps practicing with the LPL teams, because right before the finals weekend with the losers final to the grand finals, I doubt the Korean teams are going to want to play each other and reveal any strategies.
Yeah. I mean, you might be able to scrim, teams that haven't gone on break yet. Like, if Dplus is now eliminated, you might get to scrim with them if they're open to it, because it's still valuable for Dplus. A lot of orgs do just like the second they're eliminated go, all right, that's it. Like, go visit your families. It's done.
Yeah.
Some orgs do like to kind of do like a debrief weekend type of thing or week rather, where they have the team like, sit down and be like, what did we do well this season? What did we do poorly this season? And then they'll scrim with other teams and stuff and try to improve before that break. So I think there are some scrim partners T1 could find. But I guess we should talk about the games themselves.
Wait, Wolf, before we do that,
okay,
we have to talk about our sponsor for this show, which is Factor. They're back once again. As you guys probably already know, Factor makes delicious, ready-to-eat meals, fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So they're very easy. You can also choose from 35 options every week, including Calorie Smart, Keto, Protein Plus, or Vegan and Vegetarian. And they have 60 add-ons every week for breakfast, snacks, beverages, everything like that. I'm excited to use this once I get back to the States for a little bit in May. And yeah, they've got premium ingredients such as filet mignon, shrimp, truffle butter, broccolini, asparagus. Super easy. It gets shipped to your house in a box that is refrigerated. Has cold packs in there to keep everything nice and fresh. It's great, guys. Dom swears by it. A lot of people who have been using it love it to save time, and also healthier and cheaper than eating out. So instead of just ordering a bunch of food on apps, this is a better, cheaper, healthier option. And yeah, you can go to factormeals.com/MonteWolf50 and use code MonteWolf50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box. That's code MonteWolf50 at factormeals.com/MonteWolf50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while your subscription is active.
And, beyond that, you will have the delicious flavor of knowing that you're supporting Monte Wolf Show as well.
That's right. That's right. Supporting our sponsors is the best way to support us at Last Free Nation. So please, if you've been thinking about trying it, use our code MonteWolf50. Should be great. All right. Let's talk about the actual games, because we had quite a few matches that happened this last week. And we probably should just touch on, we can kind of go team by team, I guess, and our thoughts. We started out with the, of course, very close match between Gen.G and Dplus. Surprisingly close, some might say. Did this shake your faith in Gen.G, Wolf, or did it bolster your faith in Dplus? Because Dplus performed better than we expected.
Dplus overperformed. Like, they had a really great series. And, one thing that I I really felt after watching both of the Dplus series against Gen.G and the series against T1 was that there's clearly we've talked about the lack of shot calling and all that stuff with Dplus a lot, but there was clearly something that clicked in the brains of Dplus where they were like, no one expects us to beat Gen.G. We're massive underdogs, and we have the lower bracket, so if we lose, we still have another chance. And they played their best League of Legends they've played, arguably throughout the entire year in that series. And I think nerves play a huge factor in this team, and I think that when that was, seemingly somewhat removed, they played way better. And then when they played against T1, when everything was on the line and T1 was struggling, and it actually seemed really winnable, like, wait, could Dplus maybe upset? Then they totally dropped the ball. And I don't normally like to talk about stuff like this because it's kind of intangible. It's hard to really see or prove, like, with your eyes and to say, like, well, clearly they choked here. They weren't in the right mental space. Like, I don't really like to analyze too much like that, but I feel like with this team, it does seem like something like that is going on for sure. And Dplus, their bottom lane is pretty inconsistent, so it's not a shock that with one overperformance from a team like Dplus that Gen.G could be vulnerable. We'll talk about the Hanwha series later, but there was some vulnerabilities there as well. So I was happy to see Dplus play a good series just because, the squad it has a lot of good players on it. Lucid's one of the most hyped rookies we've had in a while. And I think that Dplus really flopped this season so far, and they've had their worst regular season performance of all time. The 5th place is the worst finishing that they've ever had. And yeah, they got to have one really cool playoff series where the fans had hope for one more time. So I'm happy for them. But they did get destroyed yesterday. And
yeah, I mean, the first Dplus, I think overall, perhaps like you say, their run will be overshadowed by the dominant performance that T1 had over them. But they really did overperform, right? We expected it to be close versus KT, but they came out on top, and then they had a much closer series than we thought against Dplus. And this is a team where Lucid stepped up in a big way for the playoffs. Showmaker looked very good at times. Aiming, at least versus Gen.G, had a kind of a revitalizing series. Like, Aiming is a player who has rightfully been the subject of a ton of criticism because of his brain dead plays and his very high economy style, meaning that those brain dead plays hurt a lot when he makes them. And he stepped up for a lot of these playoffs too. His Lucian looked a lot better than it did in the regular season. He got his Zeri back and had some good games on that, even though we unfortunately had to see the Yuumi again because that's the way he wants to play it. When he has all the money, it kind of makes sense, but worked against KT, did not work against Gen.G. And then they kind of just got bopped in the lower bracket by T1. But overall, I think we can say this is a pretty big overperformance from Dplus in these playoffs. Like, at this point in time, Lucid played well enough that you have to ask the question, do we actually get Tarzan to replace this guy?
yeah, I mean, I don't know if they necessarily will, as he's really improved a lot. And I think the looming threat of Tarzan maybe is motivating him. But I mean, I don't think it hurts to have, if they can afford Tarzan, to have both of them on the roster and kind of swap them in and out and see what clicks, because Dplus needs a different shot calling voice, and I don't know if Tarzan's going to be that guy, but I'd love to see Tarzan come back to the LCK, so I'm kind of biased. I want to keep both of them. I want to have the cool, maybe the insane growth rookie, maybe summer is his season, and also having Tarzan, so maybe I'm just greedy. But one thing I noticed, actually looking back at the drafts now, just to make sure, Kellen played only Enchanter supports in this series, and he played Renata. He's not playing Nautilus. He's not playing Pyke. He's not playing Hard Engage. He's not playing anything where he has to walk forward and be the deciding factor in these team fights. And that's where Kellen should be, to be honest. When Kellen is on Alistair, that's when I start grabbing my chair really tightly and getting concerned for Dplus. As Kellen, I think, has been so pivotal in Dplus's losses. He has been insanely he's played a bad version of Execute a lot of these games where he's going in nonstop and his team isn't with him, and the shot calling is failed him. Like, it's not even like Kellen is missing everything he does. Like, it's not like he's playing awesome. Like, oh, he just can't even hit the hooks. Like, he can't do it. His decision making and his timings of when he goes in, when the rest of the team is split or elsewhere, is really reminiscent of like a lot of Lucid's plays, where I'm like, yeah, that was a really cool play where you got on top of the 80 carry, but your team is like on the other side of the mid lane. Like, they're on the other part of the river. Like, where are you going, man? That kind of stuff is clear. It clearly shows that Dplus doesn't really have a shot calling voice, and so sometimes the players are just like, I'm going in, like we're not making a choice, I'm making the choice now. And when Kellen is on Enchanter supports, he can't mess that up for his team because he just kind of sits back and heals and or shields aiming and empowers aiming. And when he makes aiming more alive and less dead, like then aiming does things with the gold that he has. And so when I see Kellen on Yuumi, you know, a lot of the time you see a support player and you're like, oh, but his skills will be so wasted because he's just sitting on a cat on a book on top of the 80 carry. I'm like, that's where Kellen should be. Put him on the Yuumi. Like, it's totally fine. I want to
Kellen
see
is
more
the
Kellen
embodiment
Yuumi.
of book cat.
Yeah, I just want him to shield aiming occasionally. Like, that's his job. Put him on Lulu, put him on Nami, put him on Milio. That's what I want Kellen to be for now. We've seen him in the past like have some really good games of engaged supports, but honestly, since like Worlds last year, not so much for me. I've been more about the Yuumi than anything else. And you know, in terms of Gen.G, I don't know if we want to shift gears to talking about Gen.G and in general their run. But it was Chovy versus Hanwha that we saw this week, and not Gen.G versus Hanwha. And if Chovy didn't have the performance that he had in that series, I think Hanwha would have won it. And they were in commanding control of several of those games. Some people said like Hanwha won 4-0, but Chovy won the series, and that's what happened. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but
No, people just want to believe that. I mean, like honestly, I mean the series was good. People will cite Chovy's performance, and Chovy's performance was amazing, right? It was extremely good. But at the same time, like this series, you know, there were other people stepping up throughout this series. Right. And so, I mean, Pays had a very good Lucian game where he definitely did his job on the champion. He had some good Zeri games as well. People just love to hate on Pays right now. So,
I mean, I do think he's getting a lot of hate just because he got all pro first instead of Viper, which we've already
yes.
discussed on the show. But I think he played very well. My big kind of surprise was how well Peanut played. Like not like surprising that Peanut is not normally playing well, but some of the stuff we saw him do and how well he played with Zeka and Doran was really impressive to see. The Wukong game to me was a really big standout where I was very impressed with how good his engages were and how
Well,
well
really, Delight and Doran and Peanuts engages in that game were so good. I mean, big credit to Hanwha. Like, they have been team fighting extremely well throughout these playoffs. And something I don't see people talking about is Doran and Delight's engage synergy has been on point. When Doran's been amazing on this Rek'Sai, but when you see them comboing for these engages, it looks amazing every single time. Like Doran's getting like 4-man flash knockups on the Rek'Sai, followed by Delight with like a headbutt Polvin. It's looked really, really good.
it's just so insane because there's so many threats for the enemy AD carry all the time. And obviously in that, you know, Wukong game they were playing against Aphelios, so he doesn't really have any escapes, doesn't have Gale Force anymore. It's tough for him. It's gonna be tough for Pays in a game like that. Chovy tried his best to like Emperor's Divide, get them out of dodge, but I thought that game was arguably the most impressive. We saw, you know, Zeka go back to Akali a little bit. He played a lot of Talia. His Talia has been really good. And if anything, this series really made me believe, even though they lost, and even though you know Chovy and Pays did carry Gen.G through this one, it actually made me believe Hanwha might actually win this whole fucking tournament, dude. I was like, this team might actually win the LCK. It was the first time like my hair like stood up on the back of my neck, and I was like, it's not necessarily a T1 Gen.G finals. Gen.G might not win the whole tournament. Like maybe Hanwha could do it. Like there's still time for them to improve before the finals. I was made a believer in this series because before that I was like, all right, yeah, Hanwha will beat T1, but ultimately they lose. It doesn't necessarily matter. This series made me a little bit hyped because now I feel like I don't know necessarily who's going to win the whole thing. And I do think that Hanwha will actually beat T1 a second time in that lower bracket finals. I actually don't think T1 will improve.
I think that's true. I'm not going to go so far as to say I think Hanwha's going to win the finals or have much of a chance. I mean, I think game 3 of this series was the most exciting game that we had. And it really showed Gen.G's intelligence in adapting their builds for a specific circumstance. Having Chovy on the Grasp Azir throughout this series to threaten Viper in the backline. And, I'd love to see Hanwha pivot, but Gen.G came in with a very specific game plan, which is like, we are going to 5v5 team fight. We're not going to split push as much as we usually do. And we are just going to endlessly torture Viper in the backline. And we are going to focus on burning his summoner spells, and everyone's going to know when his summoner spells are up or down. And then the next guy's going to come in and kill him, right? So it'd be like, Chovy goes in, burns Viper summoners, then Canyon comes in and kills him, or Canyon burns the summoners, and then Chovy sweeps in and kills him. Keen was very smart, I think, in his itemization on this Rumble because they didn't have a tank. And so as the game goes on, he gets Liandry's and Riftmaker first, but then he's into Jack shows, and then he's into Randuin's Omen, and the Jinx just can't kill him with the Randuin's Omen. Like, Frozen Heart third on Chovy. Chovy's making amazing plays because he goes Liandry's into Armguard into Zhonya's, so he's just providing the backline threat after proccing his Grasp a million times in lane and getting his HP pool bigger. So this was a very impressive strategic performance from Gen.G, and it was all about shutting Viper down.
Yeah. And I do think that, Faker did it a lot in the early parts of the season before, Azir fell out of the meta a little bit, then came back and then, was obviously disabled for a while. But the early arm guard Azir is now just standard meta. We saw, the Orianna pick up arm guard as well. Faker's been doing that. Like arm guard is now pretty standard across anything that is an Aurelion Soul, basically. And it's been so impactful. And Azir is able to really benefit from it because he builds tank and has grasp. So you get the arm guard, then you get the additional armor when you finish Zhonya's, and then you just become so able to guarantee these big engages. And squishy Azir, who doesn't have Zhonya's and doesn't have any armor, doesn't have Frozen Heart, stuff like that, doesn't have grasp, can't make, not easily, it's almost impossible to make the same sort of crazy shuffle plays into Emperor's Divides that Chovy has made, that Faker has made a little bit this season, that we've seen from even Showmaker, who kind of popularized this Grasp Azir. And so I think that's going to be a huge factor going into the remaining matches they have left. And if you have to ban Chovy's Azir, then that opens up like a whole additional can of worms of other things you have to deal with for Gen.G. So I think a lot of people might look at this series and go, well, Chovy played well, but he was really reliant on Azir. And I think that that's to a certain extent true, but we know how massive Chovy's champion pool is, and some of the other picks he hasn't even shown us for a really long time, like Yone, for example, and Sejuani that you can play with Canyon, are still out there. So I don't think you could just solve Gen.G by banning Azir. I don't think it's that simple.
Well, you also have to open up 80 carries and the Rel in that case to ban the Azir. And you're not really stopping Chovy's champion pool by taking the Azir away.
I just don't think that solves this necessarily. And Gen.G looks so good right now. It is so fun to watch them. And yet I still enjoyed the aspects of Hanwha in this series as well so much. I felt like this was one of the best series of like best of fives that we've had in the LCK, that, where both teams played up to their full potential in a while. Like it really does feel like otherwise we've had a lot of series where one team underperforms, so the series is hype because like, oh, KT beat T1, or T1 like upset KT because Lehend's choked and it was not a great series for Keen. And so we've had some of those series that are kind of hype, but it felt like when you were done, you were kind of mad. You were like, well, I mean, this was 5 games, but it shouldn't have happened like this. I feel like this is one series where I'm like, Hanwha didn't fuck it up, and like Gen.G played incredibly well, and it was really exciting, and both teams played super high level. It's one of those series that just really makes you love high level, Korean League of Legends. And I hope we get this rematch in the finals. And right now, I think we're headed towards it. As I guess we could shift gears, if you're ready to talk about T1. Like we talked about the DDoS, but we didn't talk about the gameplay. I feel like T1 really did not play well against Hanwha at all.
Nope.
And then we could talk about some of the drafts and stuff, but then they didn't play better against Dplus. Like I feel like they didn't look that much better to me at all when they played against Dplus. We saw some draft adjustments from them, but that was about it. They opted into the same sort of early game fights into Dplus that they did against Hanwha, where Hanwha was like, I'm in the better position to fight you here. I have the better skirmishing comp. And Dplus were just all in disarray in a lot of the fights they took. Like the Veigar game was such a tragedy because I feel like that draft was so strong in the T1's draft where they decided to play Vayne for some reason into Veigar, and they still won and still got away with it. And like I didn't see it was only a few days, like 2 days since T1's loss to Hanwha, right? So there's small turnaround, not a ton you could do to really improve that much in that short amount of time. But I didn't feel like T1 changed much of how they played the game at all. And I think that it's a bad matchup into Hanwha, as we saw in their 0-3 loss there, where once again Zeus just gets blind twisted fate, and they're like, well, we'll get it done in the bottom lane, and then they don't get it done in the bottom lane. So I thought we were gonna see some sick like T1 resurgence, this week where we see them go, oh yeah, like you thought maybe we weren't so strong, but we've come back with a really big revamped game plan for how we're gonna play the series out, and I didn't see that. It just looked like the same. They looked like at the end of regular season.
So what I didn't understand, Wolf, is like they were allowed to have the Orianna and the Ashe, which were permabans by Hanwha, and in my opinion should absolutely be permabanned against them. Like this is, I don't think, in the incoming rematch that they have with Hanwha Life, like they're going to get those picks again. Like Orianna has been Faker's by far best champion of the split, and Ashe is extremely dangerous to give to T1 because they can play it at support, they can play it at AD carry, they will play it with Hail of Blades, they will go into the, actually technically they played it with Lethal Tempo here because they had the Renata Glask. But you get my point. Like, these are picks that are so flexible for T1, especially the Ashe when T1 is on red side and you're not going to pick it first on blue side. It's very, very annoying to deal with. And it gives T1 the tools that they want to play with, which is a lot of pressure in mid and bot. So, like, why are we giving this over?
Yeah. No, don't let T1 play strong bottom with a scaling mid. Don't let T1
or Orianna.
Yeah. Well, Orianna for Faker means perma prio because he just always wins the lane, and then he can make impact elsewhere. So he affects the jungle matchup, and then his engages for his entire career, but especially this season, as you mentioned, are so good on this pick. And his zoning with his ball on objective fights has been just fantastic, and we see it all the time. And he Showmaker played Diana into this as well, which was like, don't do it. Like it was, we saw that draft, and everyone was kind of like, ooh, it's hype, it's Diana, but is this actually like a good plan? I don't think so. And
well, we have seen the rise of phase rush Diana as well in China, right? This is going to be a pick that probably is going to be sticking around the fringes of pro play because it is quite strong right now. But yeah, I think giving Faker Orianna and then trying this as some sort of counter is strange.
Yeah, it wasn't a good idea, I don't think. And it was like the execution of the combos and stuff in team fights were pretty good, but Orianna does what Diana does the same basically in terms of the ultimate, and also can
except you don't actually have to run in there, which is the big advantage.
Yeah, that's the cool thing. Yeah, you don't have to actually stand on top of them. You can just kind of throw a Diana at people. So you also lose lane because if Faker plays as well as he does, then he puts the pressure on you. He's ranged, he can chunk you out, and if you don't have a ton of jungle resources, then your Diana can't compete. So anyway, beyond that, T1 made some really bizarre choices in draft against Hanwha where they left the Senna up, and they were like, we're taking the Senna when they didn't have great support for Keria. He ended up playing the support Scion. Like some of these things that happened in draft.
To be fair, that pick ban from Hanwha was very good because as soon as they saw the Senna and we didn't see an early rotation, like the Nautilus had already been taken by Hanwha. They had already banned Tom Kench, so they just banned Ornn, and they're like, what are you going to do? We know you play Scion. I mean, he's played Scion with the Senna earlier, but it does really limit. And the Scion has nowhere near the backline threat to Azir and Zeri that the Ornn would have. So the Ornn ban in the second rotation was very good, I thought.
Yeah, and doesn't have the utility that a Tom Kench has in terms of being able to keep the Senna or other carries alive. And we've seen Keria play tons of stuff with Senna. We've seen him play Wukong with Senna. But it's just not going to be valuable in a draft like this. And I think T1 got a little bit caught off guard. And we did see Keria actually did an interview on the English desk, like the analyst desk afterwards, and he was like, yeah, we kind of had some bad reads in the draft, and today against Dplus we tried to keep it a little bit more simple. And I think
as they pick Vayne top, okay, Keria.
Well, I mean, it was pretty. That was not.
He picked Sejuani support with a Vayne top.
That's what I'm just saying. I'm just telling you what he said.
He must be challenged on this. Well, where the interview should have been like, "This is simple."
I mean, that is exactly what Brendan said, and then he laughed. But the drafting that we saw, was definitely a little bit more core T1, but I think that was in part due to some mistakes that Dplus made, like leaving the Orianna up. But like the way that they played against Hanwha too with some of these drafts where, Faker is so good at Corki, right? He was on like a 16 game winning streak, and
I think he hadn't lost with it since MSI 2022.
Yeah. So he was on an insane streak. He lost twice in that series. And the way he was playing it is, as Faker likes to play it, is just as a pressure tool where he is basically saying, I can be wherever I want. You can try to collapse on me. I'm going to use package to warp team fights. And he's very good at Corki. Like, he's insanely good at it. But in this series, he was ganking top with it, and the dives were poorly executed. Like, he was trying to set up package ganks onto Doran. And it was just very bizarre, hard forcing from T1. And if you want to have like this crazy take about T1 winning Hanwha, you could be like, no, they were sandbagging. Like, they want Hanwha to think they're bad, and they're playing super weird because this doesn't make sense what T1 did. And I think they're smarter than this. And maybe when they rematch them, they'll actually play for real and make better draft choices. And Faker won't package the top lane. But it was just very bizarre the way that they used the drafts that they had, fighting early, skirmishing into no prio on dragons when Viper is playing Zeri and is going to win the game off of this fight. Like, you're 50-50 flipping the entire game on a fight to like maybe get a kill. Just didn't see. I mean, it was very quintessential T1 because they're one of the best skirmishing teams in the world, and they do play like that around the early game, and they're early prio, and they're usually winning bottom lanes. But it just fell flat on its face into just a really well-coordinated Hanwha. I feel like they just didn't respect Hanwha's ability to team fight in the early game and their ability to defend dives, and they just got completely outclassed. So I think the game plan has to be very different. Like, when are we going to see, Faker play Aurelion Sol and play like the Bulldog style where it's like, okay, Guma's playing a hard-pushing bottom lane, and then I'm just playing the potato scaling champion. Like, when are we going to see that from Faker? When's Faker going to play Veigar? When are we going to see some additional depth out of him? Because T1 is just like, this is our style. It's our one style. And every single game, it's the same game. It's the same draft. It's the same blind Twisted Fate, blind Aatrox, like every single time. Whereas every other team is showing so much depth, showing so much extra stuff they can do. And that's why I feel like T1 is starting to lose out, because everyone just knows what they do, what their game plan is. It's the same every time.
Well, also, I think the meta has shifted away from them, as we've gotten more scaling bot lane picks. And this wasn't always T1's identity, right? A couple of years ago, the Jinx Thresh was their bread and butter. They were about the picks. They were about the long range engage. And you would think Twisted Fate would be a perfect champion like that. And also Carrier, people are talking about him like, oh yeah, he only plays 80 carries. Like, do you guys not remember that his Nautilus was maybe the best Nautilus in the world at one point in time? Do you not remember the Thresh? Do you not remember the Renata Glask? I mean, these are all champions that Tom Kench, that we heavily associate with Carrier as a player, especially the Nautilus. It used to just, used to not be able to give this guy Nautilus at all. But they just don't prioritize it. And on Blue side, they give up Nautilus 3 games in a row to Hanwha. And Delight monsters them with it.
I think also Guma Yusi's inability or proclivity to just not play Zeri is something that really hurts them, because it's one of the strongest picks right now in the meta. And it has been like basically since she's been released. You think about Gen.G's wins, like all of their titles, I'm like, it was Ruler Zeri and then it was Pays Zeri. That was the main, iconic aspect of Gen.G beating T1 back to back to back. Was Guma is not playing this pick, Ruler is playing it, Pays is playing it, and I feel like history is repeating itself where I'm like, Viper is playing it. He's playing it. He was the best Zeri in our tournament, and Guma is just not. He's not picking it. He doesn't like how the laning phase goes with it. And, the way that Guma and Keria play lanes, even when they were playing, like Aphelios lanes, is very aggressively, trying to get, small advantages and eke out big leads and put that pressure on the plates and set up dives. Like I said, even with Aphelios, like Aphelios Gravitum and stuff like that, they were super proactive when he was playing that. Jinx as well, as you mentioned. And now he's just like, well, I could play Lucian or Kalista. And sometimes Jinx. And it's like his Varus also, like his Varus is quite good. But I feel like the identity of Guma has been, I play the pushing lane and there's nothing else. And Zeri is kind of like, I deal with pressure and then I have some all-in timings, right? You have a few all-ins you can do, like if you have level 2 all-in, if you have Nautilus, you have the level 6 all-in. And that's just not the type of play that Guma likes. He's not happy to just buy a call and sit in the lane. And I think right now he needs to maybe be okay with that. I think he needs to be okay with picking the Aphelios again. I would love for T1 to show up with a bunch of Aphelios drafts.
Aphelios Lulu?
Yeah. Like, I'd love to see that. Obviously, a lot of people don't like to watch Carrier on Lulu because it's not fun. But sometimes you have to be willing to play what you're good at, but there's also strong in the meta. Because if you just every single game go, okay, Faker's going to roam, we're going to push bottom, we're going to put Zeus on a strong blind pick that wins lane every game, eventually you get found out. Eventually you get figured out. Like we've been talking about this for over a year.
I think the problem, Wolf, is that they as a team don't know how to play around these picks anymore, like you said. So it's not just like, oh, we could switch the bottom lane. It changes the entire way the team plays. And particularly, I'll go ahead and say it, I don't think Owner knows how to play the game when his bot lane isn't winning. I don't think he does. I think he's been trashing these playoffs. I think he has been awful. And some of the games he's won, he's just done it through bot lane pressure, because then he can invade and then he can play more aggressively. But he's not like Peanut, who can play gracefully from behind and get himself back into the game.
Yeah, he has had some big misses. I mean, some of the stuff the most impressive stuff from Owner has been he and his team kind of coordinating some really cool objective steals and stuff like that. Like that's something that I feel like I can definitely give to Owner. Like his objective steals and his ability to just kind of yoink something that doesn't belong to him and his team away have been pretty cool. Like he's had some really clutch plays in that regard. But I do agree in that he has not been able to consistently dominate his opponents in terms of, vision control and tracking the enemy jungler. He often just kind of hopes and goes for the 50-50 on a lot of his setups on top lane. Or he just is like, I'll trick them, Zeus, just walk up really, really far and be super aggressive and they'll fall for my trap. And the enemy team is just like, well, he's definitely there. Like, Zeus, you're not fooling.
I mean, Owner was better in the Dplus series, but he got pretty comprehensively bopped by Peanut in the
Peanut just
Hanwha
crushes
series.
this guy, it seems like every time. Whether he's on Gen.G or Hanwha, Peanut gets in this guy's head. And it's worrying considering that once again that's the matchup he's going to have to play into Hanwha Life. So he does play well when his bottom lanes are winning, and like that is kind of his MO, and that's why his Poppy is so good. That's why his Nocturne has been so good in the past as well, where he can rely on the bottom lane winning so hard before he has 6 to where he can make a larger impact later on with Faker and setting up dives. So, we know what T1 we're going to get. And that's what T1 fans enjoy, and that's what we have enjoyed because they've been so good at this style for so long. But I do want to walk into a T1 series one day and know that maybe I could get something different. Maybe kkOma, because kkOma started off his career on, yes, his Draven was the pick that he played in the Worlds qualifiers, and everyone was really hyped about that. But he mostly played Aphelios in 2021. Like, he played Aphelios nonstop, and he was insanely good at it. I remember he had a pentakill against Damwon in, like, the first week of play, and everyone was like, this guy is sick. And he was. Like, Damwon was the best team back then. And I always associated kkOma with Aphelios for so long, and now it feels like I've forgotten that he could even play that, because he only plays, the Kalista, the Varus. And yes, these picks are strong, but where's my old kkOma? Where's a scaling Faker pick? Where's Faker Gragas?
Well, I don't know if I would classify that as a scaling pick. I mean, a lot of the time they were playing these. They were doing like Lee Sin Gragas, right, where they would just dive the mid lane and absorb all of that pressure.
No, that was still the style we're talking about. I just miss Faker Gragas.
Yeah,
I miss innovation from this team, because they used to be big innovators, and I feel like
Well, innovation was never on this team. It was Gumayushi, his brother.
Yeah. Well, they used to be innovators of the meta. They did it a lot. And then once they innovated to this style, and they kind of boiled down, like, this is how we want to play League of Legends, it's almost as if this team just thinks this is the best way and the only way to play League of Legends now. And they're now not innovators, but actually they've just become, what's the word I'm looking for? They're just trying to master this style and improve it to, like, the best that it can be. And it's quite limiting. That's kind of my feeling about T1 right now, and other teams have just been able to circumvent some of those early power plays that T1 have, and then turn T1's aggression into a win for them. It worked against Dplus. It did not work against Hanwha. Big changes have to be made in terms of drafting, and I think that they will have to have some cool picks in store for us, like some tricky drafts. And I'm not talking about Vayne top. That was tricky for sure. They won that game, and Zeus got POG, and we put the highlights up. I was like, I'm watching him last hit them sometimes when Dplus completely flounder in these fights. He did get the kills, but I need to see something that's mind. I need to see the Showmaker R5 Silas level of, like, wow, that was a really smart draft. They played right into T1's hands there, rather than if I walk into the first game of Hanwha versus T1 and they first pick Twisted Fate, I know what kind of series we're gonna get, and it's not going to be a T1W. We know it. Am I wrong, Monty? Like, do you think T1 has a chance?
Look, I think that at least Gen.G gave them a playbook of, like, if you harass Viper in the backline and blow his thumbs and keep going after him enough times, maybe you could do something. I think we'll see the same bans from Hanwha. Like, I think that Ori and Ashe are not going to be available in this series, and possibly not the Rel either. But we didn't actually get to see what Hanwha looks like on blue side in the T1 series. And so Hanwha will have side selection, I believe, in this next series, because they're technically the higher seed that's coming in, because they're coming down from, so they probably will select blue side if we had to guess. So what does that mean? Like, we see Ashe Ori banned for sure. Maybe they first pick Ori. I don't know, even though, Zeka typically hasn't been an Ori player, so we probably don't see that. And they probably don't see first pick Ashe either, because really Hanwha's been relying on Jinx, Zeri, these kind of picks, particularly Zeri might. So is the Zeri banned is going to be a question. Does T1 decide, oh yeah, we can learn some things from Gen.G. Are we going to take the Nautilus, right? To your point, are we going to play Nautilus Aphelios in the bot lane, which is what Gen.G did in game one. Now they didn't win that game, but they tried to like match the scaling. And do we play Grasp Azir? Because Grasp Azir is something that might actually be just extremely good into Hanwha, and Faker should be able to do that just fine. He's very good at making those plays onto the backline with Azir. He's, the most famous play of last Worlds was him making a backline play under Ruler with the Azir. So perhaps there is something here that can be done for T1, because at least there is somewhat of a model that Gen.G has provided. Is Faker going to play Aurelion Sol now? Possibly. Seems like a pick he would go for.
Yeah, I hope so, because it's also a pick that has some roaming agency. Like obviously not necessarily in the very early game like Faker often gets, but the fact that he can fly into team fights and actually warp them and scale incredibly well, and his ultimate is going to give him a ton of power as well, and give Guma some additional agency there as well. I think it's definitely a pick that we could see him excel on. And I know Faker's played a ton of Aurelion Sol in the past, but that was like the old Aurelion Sol. This is a very new, reworked version of the champion. But I do think he has it in him, and I think we need to see some of that depth. And I know it's in there, but will Faker and kkOma pull it out and figure it out? There's got to have to be a lot of the Korean team meetings with the whiteboard and a lot of discussion, I think. And that's. People are like, but they can't even solo queue. I'm like, this is not the time for that. Like, I think they need to actually figure out some new drafts here and change their playstyle and come up with some cool concepts over the course of this next week. I think solo queue should be the least of their worries based on the gameplay that we saw. I'm not saying it didn't impact them, because it impacted them long term over several weeks and several months, obviously, as well. But I do think that is not really the issue here, and I don't think it will be the story people are telling if T1 like lose 3-0 again. Like, well, they couldn't play solo queues, so it wasn't even fair. Like, I don't think that's what people will say, and I don't think they should. And I hope that series ends up being a five game banger. I don't know if it will be. Right now, I'm predicting Hanwha 3-1 going into that one, and then the finals. If T1 rise to the occasion and do beat Hanwha, and it's a really sick read from them, we'll discuss it at that point. But I think even if T1 win, I probably don't expect them to beat Gen.G at all. But if Hanwha,
I think the issue is that I don't know how Hanwha really adapts to what Gen.G did to them, right? Because their best chance of winning is enabling Viper, and Gen.G just showed many different ways in which they can shut Viper down, and just stay on top of him for the whole game. And so I think that's quite disturbing if you're Hanwha Life. And what it means is somebody else on the team is going to have to step up and like take out, basically be the carry of this roster. And that's not who these guys are. Like I saw people being like, oh yeah, Zeka, Akali, 12-1-2. Guys, did you fucking watch the game? Doran, Peanut, and Delight did all of the work in those team fights, and Akali is just kind of there being the janitor and cleaning up. Like, I don't know why you guys thought that was an insanely good Akali performance, because it was not. It was fine, but it was not like, ooh, Zeka hard carry.
Yeah, if you look at his damage that game as well, you can see that a lot of the team fights were him just, getting back on access to get the last bit of damage and killing the person.
Which is
fine. That's what Akali does. It is fine. But it was also not like vintage 2022 Zeka carry Akali level of play either. And
you look at the score line and you think, wow, he must have carried super hard. You watch the game and you realize it's Doran, Peanut, and Delight just mass CCing everybody.
It's the same thing as Zeus' Vayne yesterday. Like, watch that game where he mostly shot at a Cassante in lane and killed a turret, and then occasionally like killed people when Dplus tripped over their shoelaces. But yeah, there are games like that sometimes. But I think Zeka's Silas, for example, could make an appearance, depending on the drafts of Gen.G, stuff like that. Zeka's Silas into Azir was one of his old counter picks and one of the best ways that we saw Zeka find success in the past. So that could be a thing to watch out for. But yeah, Doran is not going to have a Zeus level blow up the enemy team. Like, I popped off iCarry, I had the blind Aatrox, it was me. Like, he's not going to be the one to get that done. I think it's going to have to be Viper and Peanut getting leads and then playing somehow better, or limiting the draft agency that Gen.G has to shut Viper down. I think that has to be the way that they win. But considering their early games and how well Peanut played, and just in general, how well the team played in general together, Delight, Peanut, Doran on the Rek'Sai, I think that they could get it done. Like, I'm not going to predict it right now. We'll see what they look like against T1 as well, but there's a non-zero chance that Hanwha actually lifts the trophy. And the fact that I could say that there's a maybe, that there's an if, and that I could say that I don't think it's going to be a T1 Gen.G finals, I can predict that at this moment in time.
I agree with that prediction. I think it's hard given what we saw in the Gen.G matchup, unless Chovy has just a fucking terrible finals, which really hasn't been his MO domestically in Korea. I think it's hard to predict that because Hanwha is just significantly more one-dimensional than Gen.G is, and Gen.G basically solved them. So
and last season, a lot of people, I've been saying this, and then people have come out and been like, but you said this last time. You said KT's going to the finals. Wolf, you said KT was going to go. You said you could predict that it's not going to be a Gen.G T1 finals, and KT's going to go. The difference between KT and T1 at that juncture was not, I feel like, it was not as big and not as KT favored as I feel like Hanwha T1 is now. And also, we had a big question mark with Faker's injury and stuff like that. And
right, we actually didn't know their form going into playoffs because Faker was coming back, and also we couldn't have predicted that KT would just literally not ban out Faker's two champions and then lose the series stupidly. Unfortunately, KT's pick ban was just so horrendous.
And then Lehens didn't play well, and Keen didn't play well, and it was a disaster. But I don't think that's going to happen to Hanwha, because that's how you get T1 advancing to getting bopped by Gen.G in summer 2023. I don't think that happens. I think we both see a Hanwha advance where they don't choke, they don't mess it up, and we get a good finals. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm very excited for what next week is going to bring, and I hope T1 bring us something better than what we saw against Dplus yesterday. I mean, it wasn't bad. Like, they won, obviously, but I wasn't inspired. I want to be inspired. I want Faker to lift me up. And don't let me down. Don't let me down, T1. Don't let me down, kkOma. You've been on that final stage a ton. Well, maybe one more time. Maybe one more time.
What's the attitude amongst the Korean fans right now about kkOma's return? Because he wasn't there for the World Championship win, and Tom was doing a lot of their strategic coaching and drafts, and presumably kkOma's not doing a bunch of the strategy right now. But is there a pretty negative association with kkOma at this point in time?
I think for some there definitely has been. There were trucks at the T1 HQ, but those didn't seem to be sent by Korean fans because the Korean on them was a little bit suspect, like
janky,
a little janky and awkward. So it might have been like Chinese fans who had a friend translate it or Google translated it. It was a little weird. But I don't feel like kkOma has taken that much heat. Like, he has taken a little bit of heat, from going through like DC Inside and from Korea, especially after the Hanwha 0-3. People were mad at everybody though. Mad at Tom, mad at Faker. Like, I can't believe Faker would say that at the press conference. Like, people were just very upset. People were really disappointed with that loss. But I don't feel like kkOma has been, like, he's not in the same position like Danny was in. Like, people are not mad. Like, people are not like, this guy needs to get out. There was like one truck sent presumably by foreign fans, and by the way, the trucks are so cheap to send in Korea. Like, anyone could do this.
Yeah, like $500.
Yeah. So, like, even less, I would say, for a small truck like the one they sent. Maybe like 400 or 375, something like that. But like, people see a truck and they're like, man, the fan, like, there must be like 2,000 fans that all pitched it. I'm like, no, one person could just send this truck at any point. So like, don't read too much into the trucks, guys. It is very funny, and it is a little bit crazy at times, but yeah, I think kkOma hasn't got that much heat. When I see kkOma come on stage as well, sometimes he gets like I don't want to say standing ovation, but like when kkOma walks out, like, the fans like give him a huge applause and stuff. Like,
I mean, they should love him. He delivered them 3 Worlds wins.
Yeah, he's still very popular. I feel like he's in good standing. I have no idea. Like, on this note, like, completely change of topic, somewhat change of topic, but like, I don't know what happened to Score. Like, he was also
it's so weird, right?
Like, I'm like, is there a scandal that we don't know about or something? Where did Score go? Like, how did Score just go from like, I won all these titles, I was coach of the year, everybody loved me, to like, he just vanished? What happened?
Maybe he didn't get a good offer. You know, it's highly possible, Wolf, that teams wanted him, but they were bad teams, and he just said no.
Yeah, I mean, maybe like Gen.G was like, I can't pay you what you want, and then you know, he had offers from a bunch of teams, including like Chinese orgs, and he was like, nah, that's not for me, and I'll wait it out. Maybe someone will pick me up in summer. Some disaster team will be like, oh, please help, like,
Exactly.
and they'll give me the bag. So
Hey, it worked for It's worked for Reaper actually multiple times.
It's just
I mean,
very
I know
bizarre.
that this is Reaper's game plan all the time, by the way, which is that Reaper, you know, doesn't take shit offers from shit teams. He wants to win titles. He wants to be in finals. And so he'll only take offers from teams that he thinks, you know, will be in the finals or like be competitive within the league. And if he doesn't get an offer, he's got tons of money. So he just chills out for a while, waits for some team to like underperform. And he's like, I can fix this, like he will on Cloud9. And then he just goes back and does it.
I mean, it's a wise choice. We've seen a lot of coaches do this in the past across multiple esports titles. Some Overwatch League coaches come to mind. Take a little break and then come back and lifting bags of cash. I do wonder if Score will come back at some point, though. As maybe Gen.G was just like,
I mean, he should. It would be crazy for him not to.
Maybe Gen.G just decided, like, yeah, I mean, you were pretty good, but it was our roster that actually won the titles, not you. And then they changed the roster. I don't know. It's just so weird. I have no idea where he is, but hope he comes back. Just a weird thought. Like, you know, we're talking about.
I mean, Score's my favorite League of Legends player of all time. So, I mean, I certainly hope he comes back as a coach because it was very enjoyable after all his many years of struggling to win a title, where he just comes back and just wins titles instantly, almost on Gen.G.
Yeah, I think that, you know, based on what I saw from him and how much communication he had during drafts and stuff like that, he seemed pretty important to their wins. Like, he got Coach of the Year, or at least Coach of the Split, one of the coaches of the Split. Pretty sure he got Coach of the Year as well, but at the LCK Awards. But like, people's
Not that that means anything because Zeka got Player of the Year, but you know, whatever.
Yeah, you know what you know what I'm saying. Like, people seem to think that he made a large impact, is what I'm getting at. So, just bizarre. But yeah, that's all I got, Monty. I want a good finals. I think we're gonna get a good finals. I don't think it's gonna be another Gen.G destroys T1. I don't think that's gonna happen.
It'll be Gen.G destroys Hanwha instead. Don't worry.
But it'll be an interesting, like, it'll be Hanwha didn't screw it up. It'll be Gen.G played really well.
To be fair, the Gen.G Hanwha games were very fun games to watch. Like, I don't mind a 3-0 if it's like those games again. That's fine. I'll watch those games. I mean, Hanwha did fight.
And if it's a 3-0 that's close like that, then that's still a good finals to me, even if it's a 3-0. It doesn't have to go to 5. I like, for example, the T1 KT series that was very exciting because it went to 5 games in the summer lower bracket finals was actually a really bad series. It was a 5-game series. Like, the 5 number came out and it was like, ooh, we're not sure who's going to win, but it was also not a very good series. And we knew afterwards, like, Gen.G is going to destroy whoever wins this 5th game. Whereas I think, you know, maybe T1 shows up in a big way and we're like, wow, actually T1 really has a good read here. Like, Gen.G only have 1 day to prepare for this new style they brought. Like, maybe that could happen, but I can't predict it right now. So, please, T1, like, make me look like a fool here. Otherwise, that lower bracket final, which is often my favorite to cast of the entire year because it's like not the finals, but it's in front of a huge crowd. I would love to see LCK expand this further to like having all of playoffs in front of a huge audience like this.
Oh, they won't do that. It's too expensive.
I know, but I would love it because it
would be fun.
So fun. It's so fun to do a not.
Wolf, you're so greedy. You just got your live crowd back at LOL Park, and now you're just wanting more.
I want the whole
what you have.
regular season at KSPO Dome. Get rid of the football leagues. We're putting them. I want to be at World Cup Stadium for day 1 of Summer Split.
Wow, it worked out for Overwatch League to have those ambitions, didn't it, Wolf?
Don't do. It's too soon, Monty. It's not. It's been several years since those ambitions were real. When I had a flight schedule that was having me fly around the entire world and go to Toronto and Paris and 5 Chinese cities, and then COVID happened, then I cast right here.
And it was definitely realistic that they were going to be able to afford that, Wolf. And also, You know, it was a really good use of Blizzard employees' times to create these insane schedules and then just bail on the whole project.
Talk about this further at another time. There's a lot to say. I don't know if you want to hear us rant about this on the LCK show, but anyway, I'm praying for good finals. I'm not religious, but I'm putting my hands together and rubbing them together in the hopes that somehow I will get what I want and what we deserve, which is a good best of 5, 2 good best of 5s. And lower bracket
we'll get one.
finals. I think
I
so.
will get one.
I think we'll get one, but I'm hoping for 2.
All right. We will be back next week, guys. Probably not at the regular time, but we will be back next week to discuss the losers finals, the grand finals, and what we kind of predictions for MSI based on these teams. So we'll see you next week.